I'm Dave Baker.
And I'm Andrew Price.
Welcome to Deep Cuts, the podcast where we pick a topic and walk you through the ins, the outs, and the nitty-gritty so you can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at your next forced social function. Today's topic is...
Ghostwatch.
What was Ghostwatch? It was a paranormal investigation broadcast on Halloween night by the BBC, presented by highly renowned journalists and a famous TV personality. This 90-minute special horrified millions of viewers with disturbing footage of a family besieged by infernal presences, and an ending so shocking it elicited a national outrage. This televised report was without precedent because, unbeknownst to many who tuned into this fateful All Hallows Eve, the events of Ghostwatch were entirely fabricated. But was this mockumentary a successful prototype for found footage horror films to come? Or did the Ghostwatch hoax spark an outbreak of genuine trauma? Act 1. Grim Grinning Brits. In the late 80s, the British Broadcasting Corporation endeavored on a new project for their public television channel, BBC One. Screen One, an annual multi-part anthology series, was conceived as a way to showcase dramatic films to millions of viewers. Featuring disconnected full-length movies, Screen One ran weekly throughout the autumn season. Initially, Screen One audiences were treated to wholesome affairs like the sappy, dog-centric Prince starring young Sean Bean, or conservative dramedies like the subtle but charming A Foreign Field featuring OG Obi-Wan as a Normandy vet. But that sense of normalcy at Screen One changed when a Welsh novelist and screenwriter approached BBC executives with a wild pitch. Because although Stephen Volk's first Hollywood credits were not major hits, the young writer had certainly made a macabre name for himself. Starting with Ken Russell's misunderstood historical drama Gothic, Volk followed up with Canadian cult classic The Kiss, an ill-advised return to horror for Exorcist director William Friedkin. With his Tinseltown checks potentially cashed by the early 90s, Volk instead set his sights on the television broadcasts of his homeland. Originally intended to span 6 episodes of Screen One's 4th season, Stephen Volk conceived of a long-form narrative covering paranormal activity, inspired by BBC's classic Edge of Darkness. Volk's vision concerned a supernatural investigation in a London housing estate, following the exploits of a TV reporter and a paranormal specialist. The mysteries would unravel each week, culminating in a hellish attack on a television set. Of his finale, Volk said,
"It was designed to be piped, to coin a phrase, into your home when you're least suspecting it. Expecting a live TV show, but it's obviously something else. Something masquerading as a TV show."
Although these horror stylings had been utilized to great effect by the BBC's popular Quartermass films, producers at Screen One had some serious reservations. Opting out of the Grim Scribes multi-episode creep show, the BBC decided to give Stephen Volk a one-shot special. Rewriting his original plan, Volk condensed the majority of his scripts into the final episode. Because even though he had intended to pen fictional dramatic films for the first 5 entries in the series, Volk's first plans also included a script-flipping finale. And so when Volk reapproached the producers, he said,
"Why don't we just do episode 6, which is a live broadcast from a haunted house, but why don't we do it as if it's live?"
After hiring BBC stalwart Leslie Manning as their director, Screen One producers began the crucial task of casting the project. And rather than hiring the typical big names in UK dramas and soaps, Manning and the studio found a unique set of familiar faces. In 1992, Sir Michael Parkinson, something of a national treasure to many Brits, was hired to star in the Screen One Halloween special. Once called the Great British Talk Show host, Parkinson began his career writing for the Manchester Guardian and London's Daily Express. After joining the National Service in 1955, Parkinson achieved rank as the youngest captain of the British military at the time. Upon discharge, he joined the BBC as a regular presenter on a wide variety of programs before hosting his own popular talk show, Parkinson. Well known to just about any adult living in the UK, Parkinson gave the cast an immense feeling of prestige. Starring alongside Sir Michael Parkinson, Mike Smith, lovingly referred to as Smithy, was cast as the presenter's in-studio co-host. Smith, known as much for his side gig as a race car driver as he was for his TV appearances, served as the bouncy counterbalance to the weighty aura of Parkinson. As a host of Top of the Pops, an extremely popular British music show, Mike Smith was an all-too-familiar face for many young adults across the pond. But it was Mike Smith's relation to another lead actor that perhaps caused the most chaos at the BBC. At just 22 years old, daytime soap star Sarah Greene became the youngest person to ever host Blue Peter. That doesn't sound like a real show.
I mean, all of these sound fake.
Yeah.
This sounds like somebody's just coming up with like fake British sounding thing.
It really, you know what it sounds like? It really does sound like when I'm writing my books and there's like fake in-universe histories.
Yeah. I'm familiar with Top of the Pops, so I know that.
Yeah.
But it also sounds fake.
Yeah.
This whole thing is just like, and then Michael Parkinson was the writer of Manchester Guardian, and then he went on to be the host of Top of the Pops. Meanwhile, Blue Peter was coming around
like none of it. It really does feel like an alternate history, which just goes to show you kind of how insular American culture is, because our culture gets exported everywhere, but very few things get imported here. You know, like for a long time, the most, I think, exposure that anybody in North America had to anything Korean was Psy. And that's it. They don't even know his name. They just know that the Gundam style. Like, that's the only thing they
and that is crazy, because there was like this wave of popularity of Japanese culture throughout the 80s and particularly 90s. And then like, I feel like there was a cultural saturation in the 2000s where just people of our generation who were in like high school just got obsessed with manga and Japanese culture and anime, probably primarily because of Toonami. And we got a cultural saturation of Japanese culture. And you're right. Like at that point, the only thing that people knew about South Korea was Gangnam Style.
Yeah.
That was it. Like there was nothing. And now there's like,
there's
a wave of popularity of Korean culture in the United States, where now we have a much wider ranging, K-pop and,
K-dramas,
BTS,
Blackpink.
Like Korean food is getting really popular.
Yeah.
Rosé with Bruno Mars. We're experiencing a similar like cultural revolution of South Korean culture in the United States that we had, throughout the 90s with Japan.
The fucking Netflix show that's just Battle Royale.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen the show.
Fucking
Battle Royale, but make it Korean.
Yes. I haven't seen the show, but I'm very familiar with it. It was super popular.
Fuck is the name of that show?
Everybody listening is just like, it's this.
Yeah, you idiots.
The one where there's like a little girl statue. Squid Game.
Serving as a star. It's just immediately going back to it.
You know why that happens? That happens because your brain has inhibitors. It's like a way of making your brain more efficient, where when you're trying to think of a word, your brain intentionally blocks out like all the other words that rhyme with it and are similar in concept, so that you're not sitting there being like, grab me that, sitar, mandolin, bass, guitar. Your brain intentionally prevents you from doing that so that you can always think of the right word you're trying to say, but sometimes it accidentally blocks the right word. So then you literally just can't think of what you're trying to say. And that's what that phenomenon is.
No, I didn't know that.
It's interesting that there was like this cultural revolution with Korea recently in the last, 3 or 4 years, because, back in the day, with Japanese stuff, there would be like this import process where any video game or anime that was produced in Japan, we wouldn't see it in the US for like 5 years.
Yeah.
So like whenever Dragon Ball Z got popular, like Dragon Ball Z was created in the 80s, like the late 80s.
Yeah.
And then we didn't get it until the mid to late 90s. But now everything with Japan is like 1-to-1 parity, where like video games come out same day in Japan and the US. So there's no cultural delay anymore. We're just like right up with them. And now we're getting that flood of back culture from Korea in a really fascinating way.
Serving as a star on the world's oldest running children's television show launched Green's career and made her an instantly recognizable figure in British culture. Green would go on to host a number of other popular kids programs throughout the 80s, but a near fatal accident almost brought her career to a close. Flying with then boyfriend and pilot Mike Smithy Smith, The two were involved in a brutal crash that shocked the tabloids. When the two married shortly after recovery, Green and Smith became BBC's power couple throughout the early 90s.
That's really funny to evoke his nickname during this. It's like the horrific crash featuring actress, what was her name again?
Green.
Sarah Green and Mike Smithy Smith.
Yeah. Yeah. He lost 4 feet in height. His body was decimated. Most of his spinal column was gone. He was half a man. But Smithy soldiered on. Rounding out the Screen One's special powerhouse of friendly faces, comedian Craig Charles was brought on to appeal to that rowdy 16-25-year-old demographic. As co-host and the resident poet on the chat show Wogan, Charles rose to fame as a popular act on the Edinburgh Fringe Comedy Festival circuit. After rising the ranks from underground comedy wunderkind to BBC regular, Craig Charles was cast as the star of Red Dwarf.
Fucking love Red Dwarf.
Yeah, you've told me about it before. I've never actually... I mean, I know of the show, but I've never actually really seen that much of it.
Yeah, it's definitely like my favorite British comedy.
Mm.
And it's one of my favorite TV shows ever. I make a soft recommendation to you because I don't necessarily know if it's exactly your vibe. But that being said, it's like exactly the Deep Cuts vibe. It's like the dynamic of it where it's like, you know, because the show is about the two like lower cruisemen on a starship called the Red Dwarf that are, you know, they're basically like the intergalactic military.
Yeah.
Craig Charles is the main character. He plays Rimmer. Or no, he plays Lister.
You could say anything now and I wouldn't know.
And he's like a total like slack off, like low ranking, he's like a janitor basically. And then this other guy, he's also a low ranking officer, but he like aspires to be like a general and he's like a smug kind of smarmy guy. Lister gets into trouble because he smuggles a cat onto the ship. So they put him into cryostasis. And while he's in cryostasis, there's a radiation leak and everybody on the ship is killed, including the other guy. He comes out of cryostasis and everybody's dead. And also he's been in cryostasis for 2 million years because no one was there to let him out. He's 2 million years in the future and he's on this ship by himself. But Lister was saved as a hologram on the ship's memory. So he becomes a hologram. And the cat that he smuggled on through millions of years of evolution evolved into these humanoid cat creatures. And then there's a cat guy
that's
cool. On the ship.
This sounds way cool.
And so it's like a buddy situational comedy about these guys on a starship who is like, you know, this guy, a hologram, and a cat. It's just...
I was going to say, that sounds
just the
weird.
Cuts vibe.
Have you been gaslighting me this whole time just into making fucking Red Dwarf fan fiction?
Kind of. Low-key. But I fucking love it. It's an amazing show. In similar British comedy vibe, like each season of the show or each series of the show, like kind of is a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
The first series is like a total like broad like sitcom where there's like a laugh track and stuff like that. And then the second series is like more of like a single camera comedy. And then the third series is anyway, there's different vibes to the show. But yeah, it's a great show. I love it so much. But also the cultural import thing is true as well. The fact that, you know, we just don't import other cultures into the US as much as other cultures import US culture. So we're just less familiar with these things. But there's also an element of it of the British just like live up to their stereotypes in a very specific way.
I mean, so do we, but yeah.
Well, 100% we do. But the ways that people make fun of British people, they just are that way.
Yeah.
So that's why whenever you have these shows and it sounds like made up in universe lore, it's because they're just living up to the stereotype of what British people are.
Right. A cult classic if there ever was one, Charles's chicken vindaloo-loving technician made him one of the most beloved comedic performers for nerdy fans and politically minded youth alike. With their cast in tow, Screen One took writer Stephen Volk's script and set to work. Centered on the Enfield poltergeist, an infamous British supernatural case, the concept would be a new take on a familiar story, because from 1977 to 1979, United Kingdom tabloids were full of reports of the Enfield poltergeist, a supposed haunting which wreaked havoc on a single mother and her 2 young daughters. Well known to the public, this event was met with great skepticism from some, but for others, the terrifying accounts of levitating children and flying kitchenware elicited actual belief in the paranormal.
And also, it's worth noting, and I don't know if it's here in the episode, so maybe we just cut this out if it is, but this story is what Conjuring 2 is based on. So when the Edinburgh poltergeist thing happened, Ed and Lorraine Warren like did go to the UK and like kind of showed up and kind of tried to do like this whole PR thing of like, we're here now.
Yeah.
But they really didn't want anything to do with them. They were like in the fringes of this story where they kind of showed up and were like kind of trying to investigate it, but nobody really wanted them around. And they really weren't involved with the story at all. And they took the fact that Ed and Lorraine Warren were like kind of involved with it in a tangential way. And they fleshed that out into The Conjuring 2, where, you know, as the way that Conjuring 2 tells it, they came there and they just like fucking solved the crime and got rid of the ghost and all this shit. But they really actually had nothing to do with it.
Almost like Ed and Lorraine Warren are fucking pieces of shit. And maybe you should listen to our episode on the topic.
Yes.
About Ed and Lorraine Warren and maybe how he had like a secret 16-year-old partner for... It's not a good thing.
There's a slight possibility that Ed and Lorraine Warren are grifter, con artist liars. And also Ed Warren was like just a straight up pedophile. But there's actually a much better... I mean, I liked Conjuring 2 okay, aside from the fact that it's total bullshit, like their involvement with it. But, you know, it's a movie. It's not like they're presenting it as if it's like a fucking non-fiction thing. But there's a much better adaptation of the Enfield poltergeist story that was done as a mini-series for BBC. I forget what it's called, but it's a lot better. And it's more accurate to what actually happened.
Playing on the screen behind us.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Oh my God. It's the guy who plays what's that guy in the Harry Potter movies that's like Voldemort's lackey guy?
Oh yeah, the weird guy. Yeah.
That guy.
Wow.
He's like one of the main characters in it.
Whoa, I see him now. Wow. To achieve the effect on an actual family in peril, Screen One hired real-life sisters Michelle and Charisse Wesson to play the young daughters of newcomer Brid Brennan. In hiring these unknown performers...
Brid Brennan, once again,
Brid Brennan.
Just a made-up British name.
That's a good name. I like that name. In hiring these unknown performers as the central family, potential viewers would surely be reminded of the Enfield poltergeist. But unlike chintzy takes from those cursed Warrens or stuffy news articles, Screen One hoped to bring new viewers face-to-face with supernatural terror. Shooting in a nearby suburb 2 months in advance, director Leslie Manning filmed the home haunting segments of the program on location in a middle-class neighborhood. Starring Sarah Green as the on-the-scene news anchor and Craig Charles as the comedic foil. These segments look like actual coverage to most random passerbys.
I don't know what to do. Should we go back upstairs and... Children, come on.
No, Sarah, stay where you are, please. Sarah, stay there, please. Don't go upstairs.
Why?
Because we hear that Suzanne's got out of bed, but she's not yet
Stay
appeared.
here, I don't know why.
She's not appeared on the landing.
Suzanne, where is she?
It could be a piece of its usual misdirection. Trust me, Sarah. Stay there. Suzanne must still be in the bedroom.
But where?
There's a wide of camera range right in the corner of the room. Can we cut to the hall camera? No, sorry, the landing camera. No, the landing on the door. The other landing. That's it, and zoom in. Can we pan? Can we pan left? And down.
It's interesting how they build in like little mistakes like that intentionally to try to make it seem more real.
Yeah.
But even those they kind of feel much
Weird
more
artificial.
smooth and rehearsed than a real mistake would be.
Kimmy. Suzanne, are you okay? You all right? Come on. It wasn't me. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, so that's kind of the vibe of it. It's like they're in the studio, like it's a news program, and they're cutting to this like live feed, quote unquote, of them investigating this thing, and it's kind of set up in this like real time like ghost. It has the vibe of one of those like ghost watching shows where it's like got that like silent suspense that's building. And that's the interesting thing is like, we might talk about this more later, but as technological culture moves forward, it's harder and harder to deceive people, right? Because, whenever the War of the Worlds thing happened, when you're confined to just the medium of a radio program, where number one, there's no visual. So you're just depending on, hearing the voices of the radio presenters, and also kind of like the way that radio news worked. All of those reporters, they used the transatlantic accent. The origins of the transatlantic accent was it was created specifically so that presenters would be more understandable. It's an accent designed to over enunciate everything. And so they would talk very fast and they would jumble their words because they're talking so fast. So they developed the transatlantic accent as a way of like, you can talk really fast, but everybody can understand every word you're saying. And so there's already this performance aspect to how radio news worked in the 1930s. So it was probably pretty easy to fool people into thinking that it was a real thing. There was like less skill that had to go into
and also
making it seem realistic.
You don't have to fucking make aliens.
Yeah.
You could just be like, oh my God,
I'm an alien.
I'm seeing aliens. Oh my God.
So, as technology progresses and we get the age of television and we get movies and camera equipment becomes better and better at replicating reality, at the point in the early 90s, we're already at a place where it's probably pretty difficult to fool people into thinking that a real like ghost haunting is happening. And also not only just technological, but also like people have become more and more familiar with like ghost grifters and people who are trying to pass off ghost stories as real.
Yeah.
So people are already more inherently suspicious of like, I don't know about that. Whereas in the 1930s, people were just like, what? You're telling me something? It must be true.
Wow.
So they were up against a lot to try to make people believe this bullshit was real.
Yeah. And yet they succeeded.
Yeah.
To achieve an effect of heightened realism, these scenes used actual local residents and BBC technical personnel as background and character actors. Further inducing a feeling of reality, many supernatural segments were filmed using home standard VHS equipment. And to drive the point home, Sir Parkinson and Smithy's scenes were filmed on a set in Studio D of the BBC's L Street studios. Joining these very real hosts was an actor portraying a paranormal researcher named Dr. Pascoe. The majority of the on-set crew, however, were just as non-fictional as Parkinson and Smith. With Volk's research into supernatural, the fictional doctor and real crew members employed all manner of paranormal riddle speak and actual ghost hunting tools to legitimize the special's look and feel. But it was perhaps the inclusion of a live hotline number that truly set Screen One's holiday plans apart from your standard Fright Fest. Because when the BBC allowed the producers to use the same call-in number they dialed for countless other shows, it was only a matter of time before some major lines were crossed. Although the BBC insisted callers be greeted by a message informing them of the program's fictitious nature, many of the show's callers were in for a serious surprise. And so, with their receptionists waiting and their filming completed, Screen One launched their newly titled special, aptly named Ghostwatch, for one unforgettable Halloween.
Before we move on to the next act, I basically know the answer to this, but just to expound on it, I've mentioned my sort of interest in this kind of thing on the show. I'm quite a fan of a performance art that blends reality with fiction and kind of like lives in this middle ground space where, you are making this effort to actually like bend and distort people's perception of reality by trying to get them to genuinely believe certain fantastical elements have some overlap with reality. The Velocity Gnome episode, which was done as this, me sort of like showing you this thing that's like one of my favorite things. It's an event that happened in real life that I regard at the same level as like a movie that I love, and, the Andrew WK episode, which has, a lot of similar themes. And also like, I love the War of the Worlds stunt that Orson Welles pulled. Like, yeah. I just love the concept of that. And I really I'm fascinated by that line where people bump up against the borders of reality and fiction. Like, how far can we push people to suspend their belief? And, what are the limits that you can push fiction into reality?
It's not going to come as a big surprise that I do too.
Yeah. Like I said, I know that you are into this, but I guess I just want to hear your thoughts on types of things.
I think it comes down to, like one of the major themes of the show is kayfabe, which is the kind of willing recreation of a reality that a certain in-group are a part of that maybe casual observers could be manipulated into thinking is real, but it's not. maybe it's just because we're both drama nerds or theater nerds, but I love anything that kind of like is somebody in a non-malicious way, like, you know, snake oil salesman, and like that's going too far, but any sort of like weird, we're all putting on a show and making something and people think it's real even though it's not.
Yeah.
Take me to there. And also, you know, I know that you like this stuff too, but I love paranormal stuff. I love UFO sightings, UAP sightings. I love, you know, any sort of ghost story. Like, I don't know that I believe in any of it, but I love all of it for what it means for the people involved. You know, is it just people processing grief and that's how they process it? Is it people pulling the wool over other people in their life, their eyes, you know, like trying to manipulate people by using these stories? You know, I think we both love stories in general, and the most interesting ones are the stories that have the most impact culturally, and inherently a story that's pretending to be real is just completely in line with both of our interests.
Yeah. And this is like a pretty good cross section of a lot of those concepts. And the reason why this is like kind of interesting to me, like, as you just said, you know, a mutual fascination with the idea of kayfabe. I also, you know, really love like paranormal and supernatural stuff. And we've talked about a lot of those types of stories. And while I do have a fascination with them, you know, the interesting thing about a story like this, or the War of the Worlds thing, or particularly the Velocity Gnome story, and the reason why I love that story / that event / that thing that those guys did so much, and the thing that's appealing about this as well, and also somebody like Andrew WK, is that in any of these stories, they're really not trying to get people to actually believe these things are real. They're not trying to literally convince you that this actually happened. And people did end up believing these things happen in certain situations, but that was not the actual intention of the artist. They were not trying to get you to literally believe it was real. You know, I think a lot of those like cryptid and paranormal grifter type people, you know, what sets that apart is that they're actually trying to get you to believe this is actually happening. And while I do have a fascination and an interest in that stuff, sometimes the part about the ghost hunter cryptid stuff that kind of makes my eyes glaze over a little bit is the part where they're just really trying to sell you on the fact that this is real. I have less of an interest in that part of it.
Yeah.
And the thing that sets these stories apart is that it's the reverse. They're not trying to convince you this thing is literally real. They're trying to create an environment where you could believe that something like this could be real. Those are like, they're distinct things.
Yeah.
Particularly with Velocity Gnome. Like, they weren't literally trying to make him think that he was like this chosen one who was going to the future or whatever. They were trying to create a world for him in which he could suspend his belief enough to feel like this thing was real and actually happening.
Yeah.
And I find that very fascinating and just a really conceptually interesting way of creating a piece of art. It's not a passive experience where you're like, I've created this world, you know, watch it or read it or whatever. I've created a world. I've created a compartmentalized world that you can live in and for a moment believe that this is actually happening. And that's what's interesting about this to me, is the fact that they created all these checks and balances and put all of these different rules in place to simulate reality for an evening and invited people to come into that reality for a little bit, which is really cool to me.
Speaking of things that you like to come in, Andrew, do you have anything you'd like to promote on the show?
I know you did this on purpose, but
what do you mean?
What's funny about that?
What do you mean?
What's funny about that is that you had the way better segue set up there of like inviting people into realities.
Yeah. What do you mean?
You purposely went with that.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Well, if you want to come into a book.
Damn, dude. All right. Trying to get people to come in your books.
Yeah.
All right.
Can't afford glue.
No shit.
How do you think these bindings are held together?
All right.
Well, yeah, if you want to check out a little bit of stuff I'm working on, my fictional realities that I'm inviting people into, you can check out my book, Deadbolt AI Private Eye. It's a comic about a robot detective in the future solving crimes and also dealing with existential ennui as he grasps with the idea of what it means to be alive. By going to dapricerights.com, you can pick up that book. You can pick up a couple of other things if you check out some of my other work on there. You can follow us on social media as well by going to deepcutspod.com. You can get some merch there. You can check out our hats, t-shirts, coffee mugs, baby onesies, fanny packs, anything you can think of with Deep Cuts graphics slapped onto it at deepcutspod.com. You can follow us on social media by going to Facebook and searching Deep Cuts Podcast. You can join our Facebook group by searching the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. You can follow us on Instagram at Deep Cuts Pod. You can follow us on TikTok at Mystery Treehouse, and you can join our Discord server, bit.ly.com/deepcutsdiscord. We hang out there, talk about the show, make memes, play games, so on and so forth. And you can follow us on YouTube, which you're probably watching this on. What about you, Dave? You got any?
Mary Tyler Moorhawk. I promote it all the time. It's all right. Check it out.
Where?
Wherever books are sold. And also my website, heydavebaker.com.
And now, back to the show.
Act 2, Halloween Hoax. Before Ghostwatch haunted viewers in the fall of 1992, another program cast a similar pall over its audience, helmed and narrated by Orson Welles. A 1938 retelling of the sci-fi classic devastated an entire country. Originally written by legendary author H.G. Wells, Orson's take on War of the Worlds was a broadcast the night before Halloween. This bombastic journalistic approach to a faux Martian invasion story shook many listeners to their core, and by the end of the live recording, Orson Welles was nearly arrested. In the aftermath, many claimed that the War of the Worlds broadcast was responsible for mass panic. However, the legitimacy of these claims has long been debated. Regardless, the precedent for mockumentary-style shock tactics had proved to be a potentially dangerous endeavor, and when Screen One decided to tackle their own televised hoax, they were playing with fire. Because although a logo for Screen One played before the program began, plenty of Ghostwatch's 11 million viewers simply tuned in too late.
That's interesting, though, because as we just kind of alluded to, there is debate about how...
Yeah, if people killed themselves.
Actually did believe the War of the Worlds thing, and that it might have been kind of blown out of proportion. But the thing about that is I
choose to believe it's real.
I choose to believe it's real too, but also, even if 3 people thought this was real, that's crazy.
I hope nobody killed themselves, because there's, weird urban legends about that.
Yeah.
But people are fucking stupid. And also, it's a radio show, so of course, have you heard it recently? I listened to it maybe 2 years ago, and I was like, man, this is... if this was on the radio now, I would believe it. This is amazing. Well, I don't know if I believe it, but, it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that part of that is, like I said before, just, the media was just at a level of sophistication where it was probably a little bit easier to make it more convincing, where you didn't have to have, a video component and, there was more of a removal from the audience with just through the technology, the audio quality, the way that the presenters performed. Now things are very close and intimate through media, TikTok. It's just somebody talking at you in HD as if you're sitting in the room with them. It's probably a lot more difficult to convince people that things are real in that medium. But also, it's just, it's Orson Welles, one of the greatest directors of all time, making a radio show.
He was all right. Ghostwatch opens with an introduction by Sir Michael Parkinson in a familiar BBC studio. Decorated with the requisite human skulls and full-sized paintings of classic sheet ghost, the stage had an otherwise professional newsroom appearance. And as Mike Smith and his wife Sarah Green are introduced, the entire affair is given a serious, somber vibe. Although the antics of Craig Charles break some of the tension, it is quickly made apparent that the special was no laughing matter. With crackled realistic VHS footage of the haunted daughters being attacked by paranormal entities, and one of the earliest examples of a creepy kid's drawing, Ghostwatch starts off with a wicked bang. Unfortunately for many British families, the inclusion of Sarah Green meant that younger audiences had tuned in to watch their favorite star. And as the amateurish and highly realistic performances played out before them, many children were unable to distinguish reality from fiction. Scores of Brits had grown up trusting the presence of Sir Michael Parkinson. The studio segments also fooled plenty of adults. And when those concerned viewers began calling into the hotline, only a few of them received the pre-recorded message informing them of its fictitious nature. Because it often went to the BBC opened-up telephones, many callers were simply met with a busy signal. This all too familiar dial tone was enough to convince even more viewers that what they were seeing was real. And as the Ghostwatch crew began experiencing truly terrifying paranormal activity, some households went into full panic mode, featuring the ghostly hauntings of an ultra-creepy presence referred to as Pipes. Screen One's Halloween special was pure horror.
I've seen like more than one of these to the point where it's like a thing that people do, but it's become a thing that people will like play pranks, these elaborate pranks on their family members and like stage as if like an alien invasion is happening, like the World of Worlds thing, but it's like they edit this like elaborate newscast and then they just sit down and they're like watching TV with their mom.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, the fucking aliens are here. And then it's just like a recording of them like freaking out.
Yes. If you do that, I will never forgive you.
Yeah. I've said this for decades at this point, dating back all the way to like watching Jackass and just being like, this is funny, but also if any of my friends ever did anything like this to me, I would never speak to them again.
Yeah,
like I'm not.
Do you remember that a while ago? There was like that viral video.
I'm not to be pranked.
Yeah, same. Do you remember a while ago there was that viral video of like a man and a wife in a red car and they're like driving and they're behind a semi-truck and the back doors of the semi-truck open up and a bunch of dudes in balaclavas with like machine guns jump out and they're like smashing the windows of the car and they pull the man out of the car and they take him into the semi-truck and the woman's like freaking the fuck out and they like sit in there for a minute and then the man gets out and like opens the door and gives the woman an engagement ring. Did you remember this?
Yes. I didn't remember it up until you said that. And then, yes, I've seen that.
I would break up with that person.
Oh, 100%. People break up with people for like, you see those videos where like at a wedding, like the guy like wants to smash the cake into the woman's face and she doesn't want to do it. And like people are like, that's fucked up. Like, you know, she said no or whatever. And there was one story where he did that and they actually like broke up, like they got a divorce. And it's like, you know, people are divorcing over getting cake smashed in their face when they just don't want to get dirty or whatever. Like that's out of the world worse.
Yep. Over 1 million disturbed viewers called into the BBC during and immediately after its airing. And it's easy to see why. Not only is Ghostwatch realistic, it's also extremely strange. Unlike some haunted house stories, including the true case it's based on, Screen One's special makes bizarre creative choices regarding its spirits. For instance, when one is possessed by quote-unquote pipes, they often speak in off-putting rhymes, and when the poltergeist draws near, the distorted sound of yowling cats can be heard.
There are incredible noises coming from the walls and from the ceiling. Ah! Oh, Kimmy! Kim! Where are you? Did you do something? Oh. Susie. Stop it! Stop it, Susie! Suzanne, you're coming with me. Suzanne? You're coming... Suzanne? Listen to me, Susie. Susie? Can you hear me? Suzanne, do you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Get out. Get out if you don't want to be here. I don't care. You just mess things up. You mess everything up. I hate you.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, if I was a kid watching that and it was like kind of presented as real, I feel like that would freak me the fuck out.
Yeah, me too.
I'd be so fucking creeped out. I remember, and this was not when I was a kid, this was when I was an adult. I might have even told you this before and maybe even on the show, but in like 2011, I had a paper route. I delivered newspapers. I would start work at like midnight. And one night before work, I watched Fourth Kind with my roommates. Mm-hmm. And Fourth Kind is a movie that is like, it's like this. It's made to be presented as if it's real. And it's kind of interesting the way that they did it because they made a movie that's like based on a real story, supposedly. And it's like starring actors. So like Mila Jovovich is the main character. In the beginning, they have Mila Jovovich and she's on camera and she's like, tonight's film is based on a real thing that happened. And throughout this movie, we're going to show you actual footage that was captured. So there's like the dramatization of the movie, which is starring actors. And then it cuts to footage of the real thing happening that's like juxtaposed with the dramatization. And then there's these people in these like video camera caught on camera incidents of, fucking aliens and all this shit. But the whole thing is a movie. The real footage is like other actors who are playing as if they're real. So we watched that movie. It's not even good. Andrew in a room with 3 other people was like, this fucking sucks. But Andrew by himself out in the woods delivering newspapers was very scared and regretting watching that movie right before leaving.
And you've never been the same since.
I haven't. It changed me.
We both look over and there's just like
Mila Jovovich.
Mila Jovovich standing all creepy in silhouette with just 2 dot eyes. Oh my God, it's the bride of Paul W.S. Anderson.
That classic Universal monster.
Yeah.
The bride of Paul W.S. Anderson. But yeah, that was creepy. That was pretty creepy. I feel like if I was a kid and I watched that, I would think it was real too.
Not content with one boogeyman, the spirits of Ghostwatch are legion. With a dead child molester a la Nightmare on Elm Street, a Victorian presence in the style of British classic The Woman in Black, and an unseen plate thrower from the Poltergeist films, Ghostwatch made sure to serve up spirits catered to every fear in the book. And aside from harmlessly odd occurrences like inexplicable water spots on the carpet, Ghostwatch also featured legitimately gruesome content when one of the children are attacked by raking claws and Pipes the ghost appears with bloody, sightless eyes. The effect is deeply unnerving. Backed by its bona fide crew, low-res VFX, and BBC's prestige, Ghostwatch is still creepy to this day. To add to the unease, phone calls began pouring into the program as if it were live. When those scripted callers complained of paranormal activity occurring in their own homes, many viewers feared for their safety. But when Sarah Green is dragged away by demonic forces near the end of the program, audiences were appalled. But those who stuck around for the shocking conclusion, things were about to get even worse. As a full-on onslaught of paranormal entities attack the BBC studio, it is revealed that the audiences have participated in a nationwide seance, and by unwittingly involving themselves in the program, viewers were warned that they would be next. Before the end credits rolled, Sir Michael Parkinson is seen stumbling around alone in the darkened studio. As he approaches the camera, the tape begins to distort, and he speaks in disturbing nursery rhymes. The warped footage pauses on a moment while cats scratch, and Parkinson's face briefly resembles Pipes with bleeding eyes.
That's so cool to me.
Yeah.
This probably comes as no surprise considering all we've talked about, but I went to film school for transmedia. I majored in documentary filmmaking and minored in transmedia, which is, interactive media. So anything that's like bringing the audience in and involving them in some way that isn't just like, Peter Pan being like, clap and Tinkerbell can fly again or whatever is just so cool to me. I love it so much. I wish they pushed it further than just being like, you're participating in the
I wish
seance.
they killed some
Yeah, I
people.
wish they actually sent like crew members into people's homes and just started randomly murdering people to create the effect that it was actually happening. No, like if they were able to like call people's houses and stuff like that's my dream.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And also just the fact that they're not pretending that it's real newscasters going in and doing these things. This only really works if you get Parkinson or, our equivalent of like a Dan Rather or a fucking, whoever, Don
Alex
Lennon.
Jones.
Yeah, Alex Jones. Yeah. It only works if you get Alex Jones.
Yeah. The pillow guy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, and I'm just kind of repeating what I said before, but like, that's what's fascinating me about it. It's not trying to bring fantasy into reality and try to make people think something is real. It is bringing people into fantasy in an interactive way, like creating a compartmentalized world that people can actually exist within, if even for a couple minutes.
Yeah. The backlash during and after Ghostwatch was swift and immense. From concerned parents to the baffled elderly, 1 million viewers called in to complain. But for one family, Ghostwatch may have been responsible for a complicated tragedy. Already struggling with feelings of paranoia and severe learning disability, 18-year-old Martin Denham became supremely distressed after watching Ghostwatch. Convinced that he was being haunted by Pipes, the ghost, Denham's father said,
He seemed a bit upset because things were happening at the time in the house that had been happening on Ghostwatch. The pipes were banging.
Within a week of viewing the program, Martin Denham took his own life. In his pocket, the teenager left a note to his mother that read,
"If there is ghosts, I will now be one, and I will always be with you as one."
Seeking justice for their son, the Denham family convinced the Broadcasting Standards and Commission to review the Ghostwatch hoax. In their findings, the commission concluded that BBC should have done more to warn viewers of the special's fictitious nature, and that by veiling the project in reality, there had been a
deliberate attempt to cultivate a sense of menace.
Although the BBC was forced to make a public apology, most of the cast and crew maintained their innocence. Of Ghostwatch, star Michael Parkinson perhaps insensitively claimed,
"Nobody got hurt, nobody died." The thing about this is, like, I have a bunch of thoughts and opinions that kind of swirl around this, because on one hand, given my penchant and fascination for this kind of like immersive storytelling, I don't want the kayfabe to be broken at all. I would want it to be presented as the most realistic possible. Alien Encounter, it was presented as this immersive thing of like, it was like a double layer of kayfabe, because the ride at Disney World was presented as if you were going into a science lab to like witness an alien, but then the stage play was a recreation of a Disney World ride. So it was presented with a double kayfabe of they're bringing you in and presenting it as if you're going into a science lab to see an alien, but they're also like referencing Disneyland and being like
double blind kayfabe.
Yeah, and being like, "Oh, what ride did you go on today?" Which is probably something that happened at the real ride. So it was like they were presenting it as if you were in a Disney World ride, but then within the Disney World ride, they were presenting it as if you were in a science lab, which I loved. But the one thing was, and this is funny, at the end of it, they're like, as we're filing out, they're like, "Watch your step because it gets really slippery there." And I was just like, I know that that is like good and like a safety precaution, and they should do that. And also for me particularly,
yeah, you just broke your fucking leg.
I need to know that information because I could actually slip and fall. But also, I wish that they didn't do that and they just maintained the kayfabe the whole time and didn't be like, "And also watch your step," because that's the slight removal from the kayfabe that I actually don't like. I was like, I know that they should do this, and specifically I need them to do it, but also I kind of don't like that they did it. I wish they hadn't done that. So I love that total immersion. So on one hand, I'm like, no, like they shouldn't even put the warnings. They should just go full bore and just present it as if it's fucking real. But my practical, logistical mind understands that from a safety perspective and also a liability perspective, they just kind of have to do that. They have to put the disclaimer there. I don't know if they should have gone out of their way to put more of a disclaimer, because number one, I mean, there's a couple of things. So number one, I feel like within the realm of like what a reasonable person would or would not believe, I feel like it's kind of unreasonable to think that like somebody thinking that this ghost thing was real is like a reasonable reaction from a normal person. I don't feel like that's like a thing of like, yeah, of course people are going to think this is a real thing. Like that doesn't seem like a reasonable reaction from a normal person.
They're selling that it's real.
Yeah.
We've both looked at it and was just like, that's just not real. But like, media literacy wasn't as, it wasn't as tangible at that time. Maybe people didn't have as good a grasp on these things. But also I kind of agree with you where I'm like, this goes back to the perennial conversation of like, the hyperviolence in movies or, just anything problematic in a film. Like, where is the line between protecting the audience and treating the audience with respect? Because Travis Bickle objectively has spawned people who have done harm to humanity.
Yeah, or any of those types of characters.
Yes.
Gordon Gekko.
Yes.
Jordan Belfort.
Yes. Like, objectively.
The fucking Joker or whatever.
Yeah, like, objectively, they do harm, but also the people who see those things and emulate them, wouldn't they look at anything? And at least maybe you're using satire or cautionary tale with those characters to try and deter other people. So, like, does it even out in the end? I don't know. Right now, it feels like satire's dead and it just will never work.
Yeah, that's another good example of this exact concept where it's like, yeah, people are going to misinterpret satirical characters or characters that are meant to be a cautionary tale or like depicting, a bad thing, for a thematic purpose. And they're going to misinterpret that and like create like hero worship or idol worship around that character. That's going to happen. Does that mean that like there's some kind of onus or responsibility on creators to stop doing that. Like, you should be more literal and, deliberate in like showing that these are bad people. And, Walter White, every episode should look into the camera and say, I'm a bad person. I'm doing a bad thing. Like,
don't emulate me.
Like, I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
I think like, and as much as that will happen, people will misinterpret those characters. And that's a bad thing. That's like, as you said, like a societal net negative, I guess. I don't think that then puts a responsibility on somebody to have to like water down their art to like accommodate for that.
Yeah.
Like, that just seems unreasonable to be like, oh, because people will inevitably do this, I have to put a little fucking sticker at the bottom of the screen constantly being like, every time Jordan Belfort does a bad thing, that little like Mortal Kombat guy pops up and goes, bad thing. Like, I don't think that should happen. That seems.
I kind of do, though.
I mean,
you've convinced
that
me.
was a bad example.
Prior to this moment, I was with you, and now I'm kind of like, bad thing.
That was a bad example because I accidentally made it awesome.
Yeah. Or maybe it should just be like, the guy pops up and goes, this terrible, despicable moment is brought to you by Four Loko. I kind of...
Yeah, I accidentally made it cool. But that aside, if it wasn't that, I think that's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous to have that expectation of people because, number one, it's just putting the blame on.
But I think there is a counter argument of there is something about where, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what the line is. I don't know where the sticker needs to be applied, where that's a bad thing goes. But like, objectively, when Martin Scorsese makes 15 movies that are all supposed to be satirical cautionary tales, and all of them are misinterpreted by a certain type of man.
Yeah.
Because it's always men.
Yes. Martin Scorsese movies have created a subgenre of guy.
Yeah. And like, I love his movies. And so I'm not advocating like, we shouldn't let Marty Scorsese make movies. That's not what I'm saying. But like, at a certain point, even if it's just Goodfellas, Casino, Wolf of Wall Street, and The Irishman, all of those movies, or Taxi Driver, fuck The Irishman, Taxi Driver. Even if it's just those 4 movies, all of those movies are like
banned. You want to ban?
No, that's the thing. That's the thing is I think they're great movies, and I think that they accomplish what they're trying to do. The problem is certain people, I don't know if that their media literacy is just so low, or they're fucking stupid, or there just is a line where you choose to not interpret the thing the way the artist is interpreting or putting it out, and you take a different message. And I don't know how to fix that, but like, there has to be some level of give and take, or a fucking PSA where we all get together and go, hey, shitty incels, Jordan Belfort sucks. Like, don't do this.
Well, I think people do try to do that. But here's the thing about that. This is kind of getting off on a tangent. But my viewpoint on that, I thought about this a lot because I saw a video from that self-made is a myth.
Oh, yeah. Guy. The guy we talk about all the time. Yeah.
They made a video after Oppenheimer came out where they were like, Oppenheimer was a bad guy. And this, when people watch this movie.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we know.
And he's making this movie of like, people are like thinking that Oppenheimer is like this cool guy, but he's actually a bad guy. And Oppenheimer, the movie, is bad because they didn't go out of their way enough to like show that he was a bad person. And like presenting it as if the movie Oppenheimer like glorifies him and what he did, which it doesn't. But
I think it could have gone harder in certain areas or depicted things differently, but I agree with what you're saying.
And the thing that they're talking about is that people are taking that and like choosing to hero worship Oppenheimer in that way that they do Gordon Gekko, blah, 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 blah. This is my opinion on that. I think it is in somewhat bad faith to assume that the guys who are hero worshiping those characters just actually genuinely don't get the satire and that they think that they're supposed to be good. In my opinion, they get that that character's supposed to be bad.
Yeah.
They just still like that character.
Yes.
And the character just exists as a totemic representation of what they want to be.
Yep.
And they use it as that totemic representation. They don't care that it's supposed to be something. They just like it for what it is on the surface level, and they've chosen to accept it as an avatar for a certain philosophy or personality type or whatever. And they're just going to find that anywhere. You could remake Oppenheimer where at the bottom of the screen at all times, it's just like reminding you of all the people that died because of what he did and being like, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He did bad things. And people would still glom onto what he totemically represents and still do that. I don't think it has anything to do with not going far enough with making it clear that he's a bad guy. I think people just are choosing to accept that character as a representation of what they want to be.
I agree with what you're saying, but I also think that, don't you think there has to be some level of self-reflection by the author, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean,
like
that,
not
separately, yes. Separately, like you said before, and this is how I would feel. I might push back against it, but in my heart of hearts, if I made 10 movies and every single movie was adopted by the shittiest people on earth as like an anthem for their shittiness, I would probably think like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
I definitely would think that.
Yeah.
And maybe not. Maybe like when you're actually put into that situation, like a Marty Scorsese.
I've experienced that. I've 100% experienced that of people. I'm not going to give any examples because it would be pretty apparent who I was talking about, but I've experienced people fundamentally misunderstanding things I've written and come to me seeking the approval of like, look at what I did. I've totally misunderstood what you're doing, or I've chosen to take the wrong lesson. Like I actively chosen to take the wrong lesson. And don't you approve of this? And I've had to, frankly, artfully navigate my way out of them, trying to be like, I don't want to piss you off because I don't know what you're going to do, but no.
You're of course referring to that guy who invested $100 million into creating his own action hospital.
Yes, that is exactly what I am talking about.
50 people died.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's like the general way I feel about it. But also on the other hand, or on the same hand, even regardless of that, if I made a thing and somebody killed themselves,
yeah,
it would haunt me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter, you know, whose fault it was or whatever. I would be so disturbed by that. I don't even know how I'd react to that. I hopefully never have to experience it, but I don't even know. We talked about this in a previous episode, but like the Gran Turismo guy, that movie that
we didn't.
Spandrew and you talked about this. The Neil Blomkamp movie, Gran Turismo.
Yes.
That's based on a true story of a kid who was a great Gran Turismo player, and then he entered a contest to drive a real car and then became a real race car driver. It was shown in the movie, and it's a real thing that happened. He accidentally killed a guy. He went over a hill too fast and became airborne and crashed through a fence and struck a spectator and killed him. I don't know how it really played out in real life, but in the movie it's presented as like he gets really depressed and he like goes off grid and nobody can find him and he's just like at his parents' house or whatever. And then his like mentor character in the movie, played by David Harbour, like has this emotional speech with him and convinces him to come back. And however that played out in real life, he did come back to racing and he races to this day. I don't think I could.
Yeah.
After killing somebody?
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it again.
Yeah.
And maybe that says something to me and my lack of passion about something. I don't know, but like, I don't think I could.
Lucky for me, no one's ever died from like pencil shavings or something.
Oh, somebody's going to die from a paper cut accident.
Yeah.
But another layer on top of that is the fact that this is more of a sensitive subject, which is why I kind of left it to last, is that the person we're talking about is somebody who clearly was suffering from extreme mental illness. This was a person that had like paranoid delusions of a ghost, and this show just like augmented existing mental illness that was just already occurring in this kid. So, you know, on one hand, that's very sad, and I don't want to undermine or underplay, you know, how serious it is, you know, people who are struggling with mental illness, and the fact that, you know, we shouldn't just callously shrug that off as like, they were just fucking crazy. Like, that's not how I feel at all. But on the same hand, how responsible are you for putting something out into the world and then a person struggling with mental illness, taking that and interpreting it in a way that causes harm to them, but is not, as I said before, like the traditional reasonable reaction of a normal person? Like, how responsible can you feel for that? You know, where's the line? When I was working at Super Deluxe had this particular vibe. It was kind of this sort of like in your face, kind of weird, absurdist style. And one time for National Women's Day, one of the animators on the team did this animation, and it was like a giant woman like walking through a city stepping on men. And it was just like a little short, like 20-second social media video for Instagram. And it was just like a giant woman stepping on men. And it was like Happy National Women's Day. It was just like an absurd thing. And we received a 50-page manifesto in the mail from somebody who said that they watched that video and they had like a giant woman fetish. Like a fetish for like large women, like hurting them and stepping on them. And clearly like a deeply mentally ill person, not for the fetish necessarily, but
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that fetish. That fetish is a totally normal fetish to have.
For writing a 50-page manifesto where they were essentially outlining how watching that video like opened up like a level of like existential dread in them that caused them to like self-harm, and that they were going to like, and like, that's fucked up. And I'm sure that animator was probably like, fuck, like that's probably disturbing to them, and it would be disturbing to me. But also like, that's not a reasonable reaction to an animation of a giant woman stepping on men. Yeah. That's not a reasonable reaction. And like, how responsible can you feel or be for a clearly deeply mentally ill person being in their own world and having their own reaction to something that you made and interpreting it through the lens of mental illness? Like, how responsible can you be for that?
I don't have the answer.
Like I said, it's not a callous like, oh, fuck it, they're just fucking crazy, so who cares? But I don't know. I don't know.
And I think there is a certain component of it, but then there's also like, there's a certain, like the goal of making art is to produce something that sparks an emotional reaction in someone, right? And when you create things and put it out into the world, you're not in control of who those things go to. So there's a certain percentage of it that you are responsible, and then there's a large percent of it where it's just chaos theory, and what's going to happen is what's going to happen. Yeah. And like navigating that emotional kind of fulcrum it just is what it is.
Yeah, there's no accounting for it, and also like it's hard to, draw the line, because in those things like maybe there's like a little bit more of a direct parity between what they made and what the result was. Like they made a thing about presenting a ghost haunting as if it was real. Somebody thought that they were haunted by ghosts and killed themselves. So that's pretty one-to-one. But then, you might make like a comic about a fuzzy puppy, like...
Or the Fantastic Four TV show where they took the Human Torch out of the animated show because they thought he was going to inspire children to light themselves on fire because they wouldn't know the difference. And like, part of me thinks that that's responsible. And another part of me is like, do kids really think they're going to light themselves on fire? I don't know. I mean,
and also if they do, like, is that the fault of an animated show? Like, is that really like a responsibility of like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
The Denhams weren't the only family who suffered from the adverse effects of Ghostwatch. Several parents came forward with similar but non-fatal side effects exhibited by their children. Originally classified as PTSD, most of those traumatized by Ghostwatch eventually shook off their fears.
That's the one thing where I feel like there is like, the stuff about people thinking it's real or whatever is, I kind of feel like that's a little absurd to expect that of the production. That's one thing where I start to maybe agree with it a little bit more, is like with kids. Yeah. 'Cause it's not like, if an adult thinks this is real, that's a little silly.
Yeah.
But kids think that movies are real. Like they
don't know. Yeah.
I do think that there should be not a necessarily like a disclaimer of like, this is definitely not real, but a disclaimer of like, don't let your kids watch this. It's fucking scary.
Yeah. Although several hoax films popped up in the wake of Ghostwatch, take America's own Alien Abduction, or Without Warning, for example, the true influence of Screen One's special lies in the found footage genre. Because even if the Blair Witch creators deny any knowledge of Ghostwatch, there is a clear through line from BBC's classic to horror trends today. In fact, the team behind pandemic powerhouse Host claimed their found footage phenomenon was directly inspired by Ghostwatch. And even though Ghostwatch never aired again on the BBC, the special has become a cult classic in its own right. Available to stream on Shudder for the last few years, Ghostwatch has only continued to grow in popularity. And for the last several Halloween seasons, there has been a grassroots campaign to stream the special en masse as a tribute to Ghostwatch's nationwide seance plot. And even though writer Stephen Volk would go on to pen award-winning short story sequels to Ghostwatch, he has openly criticized the nature of his TV program. In agreement with legendary British horror author Ramsey Campbell, Volk said,
I'm a great believer in what he said about horror, and that is that horror is sometimes the business that goes too far.
Well, I will say, I wish there was more shit like this. Not that I want people to die, but I love... Did you know that one time they tried to do this thing and people thought it was real? Stories.
Yeah, there's surprisingly few examples of this. And maybe because it's hard to fool people into thinking
even
that
Blair Witch,
real.
right? Like, Blair Witch, people thought was real initially.
I thought it was fucking real.
I did too, but I was like,
I remember
young.
arguing with people, insisting that it was real, and people being like, "It's not real, it's a movie," and me being like, "No, there's a fucking website where you can go and read an article about the event." Like I drank the Kool-Aid hard.
This is your secret origin for loving kayfabe because you believed it as a young person.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Like, I remember feeling like when I learned that it wasn't real, and when I saw Blair Witch and I believed it was real, I had no conception of like marketing gimmicks. The idea that you would lie and say something was real to generate buzz, and that was like a marketing strategy, like saying something's based on a true story in the beginning, even though it's just not, or presenting it as if I couldn't fathom that as a concept. And so later on, when I learned that, and that was my first introduction to that, I'm like, oh no, it wasn't real. That was all just a lie. And then like, it was a lie because that's a thing that like companies do, is like they lie about things to get you to believe certain things, to get you to create word of mouth and hype.
Purchase the product.
Aside from the sort of capitalistic marketing aspect of that, which I'm not as interested in, I really was genuinely fascinated by that idea of like playing with reality in order to grab people's attention.
I'm glad you're here. It's been weird doing the show without you for however many years it's been now, 2 years. So I'm glad we can bond over dumb shit like this.
A total 180 from the last episode where you were just like cursing me coming back to life.
Yeah, I don't think so. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's this elephant in the room, or like this black mark on the thing of like somebody killed themselves, which is, you kind of have to just remove that and put it over here in a box because it's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's a really cool special. I love the concept of it. I don't think it's believably realistic, but it's cool looking. It's shot in a really cool way. I like the way it looks. I don't think it looks convincing, but I like the way it looks. Yeah. I like the concept of the transmedia aspect of like presenting it like a news broadcast, talking to the audience, building in all of those little like things to try to make it seem more realistic, like mistakes and like little like awkward stutters that wouldn't happen in a real movie. The idea of like incorporating the audience into it and being like, the ghosts are in your house too. I love all of it. It's just a really cool thing. And it's like, it's not only just like up my alley, but it's like my exact vibe of what I find interesting about storytelling and the types of stories that I want to tell, and like literally what I went to school for. So I'm all on board.
I agree. And on that note, I'm Dave Baker.
And I'm Andrew Price.
This has been Deep Cuts. If you'd like to find me on the internet, you can do so at heydavebaker.com, or you can find my book, Mary Tyler Moorhawk. You can also find it in bookstores, wherever books are sold.
You can technically find it in books because it's like, it's a book within a book.
It is a book.
You can find it in books.
Yeah, that's true. You can. Andrew, where can people find you on the internet?
You can check out my website, dapricewrites.com, where you can pick up my book, Deadbolt AI Private Eye, which is a story about a robot detective solving crimes in the future and dealing with existential ennui. That is a comic. You can check out Deep Cuts on social media by going to Facebook and searching Deep Cuts Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Deep Cuts Pod. You can join our Facebook group by searching Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. We hang out in there, talk about the show, make memes, that kind of fun stuff. You can join our Discord server, bit.ly.com/DeepCutsDiscord, where we also talk about the show, make memes, play games, hang out, so on and so forth. You can follow us on TikTok at Mystery Treehouse. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Deep Cuts Podcast. And you can check out our website, deepcutspod.com, where you can get merch like hats, t-shirts, and coffee mugs. And you can follow me on TikTok at DeadBoyDetective. Deep Cuts is a production by Boy Genius Media. If you'd like to find this show and others like it, please visit boygeniusmedia.com or deepcutspod.com.
If you want to join in on post-episode discussions, please join the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. Finally, subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional video content.
The incidental music for this episode was created by D. Catalano, whose music can be found at wekeepoddhours.bandcamp.com. This episode of Deep Cuts was written by Matthew Mitchell. The episode was edited by Louis Poggie. If you'd be interested in writing for Deep Cuts, email andrew@boygeniusmedia.com.